I could see people over there as well. So I received a question that was really asking about Canadian programs for children that are based on more experiential types of, sort of teachers' experiences rather than just educational or scientific ones. And I wanted to state that one of the things that's so critical about programs that are on social emotional learning, and this is true, is that it has to be based on teachers' experience. Otherwise, a program will not be successfully implemented if it's not seen as realistic for teachers. So the program Roots of Empathy, the one I told you about, brings the baby into the classroom, that was actually developed from a former kindergarten teacher who helped create these programs in the school that brought mothers and their babies into the classroom. And what she noticed, they were helping the parents with the babies, is that whenever she walked around the school with the babies, that all the children started gathering. And all the children would be drawn to the baby. And so she developed the Roots of Empathy program, realizing that there was something in which young children, or even the older children, were drawn to with babies. So again, it is so important that a lot of these programs and the ideas for them actually have roots in real teachers' classroom experiences and things that they try out that then they develop into they can develop into a program with colleagues.
Well, I better stand up as well, just so that I can see this side too. My question was a question about the role of museums in the development of creative and emotional learning. And I think this is a really good question, because one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, but perhaps I didn't say enough about, was that you really need partnerships. You really need resources beyond the resources of your classroom. I'm very lucky. I'm actually an Australian, but live in London. And one of the amazing things about London, if you ever visit it, is that you can go into all of the museums for free. You can just walk in, And this, I think, is amazing, because it really means that you have all of the possibilities to use these resources for learning. And to tell another sort of personal story, I have 4 children, and when I was doing the UNESCO study about 5 years ago, my youngest one was only about 7 years of age, and he travelled around the world with me. And he learnt things by going to the museums in each of the places we were in. So when he was studying about history, he was looking at the Colosseum in Rome. And when he was studying about science, he was lucky enough to be able to go to the Science Museum in London and play with gravity machines and all sorts of things. And this has given him this enormous knowledge. But when he went to school in London, formal school, he kept saying to the kids, oh, yes, when I was in Rome, I saw this. And yes, when I was in this, I did. And they thought he was making these stories up, because they said it's not possible that a child has had this set of experiences. But he did have. And I think that the museum provides a wonderful site for children to learn. And it's also wonderful if they can go not just with the school, but with their families to the museums, because there's very nice conversations that happen between the parents or the brothers and the sisters and the children as they're looking at the artworks. And if you can go at some stage to the Tate Modern Art Gallery in London, I like to go there because it has the most unusual and interesting artwork. But the reason I like to go there is that the conversations that the children have is fascinating. How they deal with these works and what they're saying in response to these artworks. So please use the environment that is around you, and it doesn't have to be museums. It's wonderful if you've got museums, but if you don't have museums, we saw in Anna's presentation how the teacher had used the cracks in the pavement as a source of inspiration. It can be the trees, it can be anything outside of the classroom. And make the effort to take the children outside of the classroom, even if it's only outside the classroom to the playground. It's better than always learning inside the classroom. Now, one of the bad things in England was that the museums are free, but that they have an enormous amount of worry about safety of children. And if you wanted to take the children across the street, you had to fill out 15 pages of forms. Would they likely to meet this? Who will be supervising? Have they got permission from the parent? Everything crazy. So one of the things we're trying to do is stop this crazy paperwork that stops you actually using the environment that's around you. So yes, it's absolutely vital you get outside of the classroom. Thank you.
Hola, again. Quite different from each other. And the first of them, and I saw this coming, has to do with the high suicide rate among the children and youth in Finland, and the reasons for it and my thoughts about it. And if I knew, I'm sure that the rates, or if somebody knew, would be a lot lower at the moment. So it is a really difficult, it's like a triangle in Finland. We have high number of alcoholic people in Finland, so high assumption of alcohol, high levels of depression, and high levels of suicides. And those three things are, of course, very much interrelated. And we are trying to attack to all of those either together or one after each other. And there are several explanations. The most recent ones are quite biological. There are genetic findings in very many family lines who have the biological heritage in Russian, that there's something in the genes of some people who can make these people more vulnerable. So increase the tendency of becoming addicted to alcohol or addicted to shopping or drugs or whatever. But then there are a lot of, there's the weather. There is the weather. So I'm sure that you've seen Finnish people quite a lot in Costa del Sol, drinking and sunbathing. So the number of people suffering from seasonal disorders, so when it gets dark, the sun really doesn't shine. I mean, where I'm born, and I'm actually born in Rovaniemi, which is the city where Santa Claus lives. So it's the city up in north where the polar circle goes through the city, up in north in Finland. So the sun doesn't come out in 4 months. So it is as dark as it is here in the middle of the night, through night. And I live in central Finland, where we get sunlight between 10 in the morning till 2:30 in the afternoon. So when you walk to the university, it's black, and when you come back at 4, it's black. And so this is one of the reasons that people really suffer from the lack of light, and it increases your willingness to get completely wasted. But mostly what we are looking at the moment when it comes to all these things is the cultural attitudes. And in Finland, we have, you don't know for how many jokes we have about people who drink wine. Because it's only sissies and girly men and girls drink wine. And if you are a seriously masculine man, you drink vodka. And not even that, even the students make their drinks, they fix it with spiritus fortis. Does it say anything to you? For the medical doctors it does. The 100% alcohol that doesn't have the taste of an alcohol. So even when I got my PhD and I had a party, we had Fanta and Coke and then juice and then spiritus fortis. It tastes a lot better than vodka, but it's a lot more unhealthy in a way. So it's a mixture, and the suicides are very often related to too much drinking and being too depressed. So we are working on it. But there's a lot to do with the attitudes. Also, Finnish people are not keen on asking for help, not keen on reaching out. And this goes for children as well. People wait when they get burned out or tired or depressed, because it's a question of pride. You don't go and ask for help. You try to sort things out on your own, and then in often cases it's already too late. So it's the attitude is, I think, the worst part in this mess. And then there was another question from me concerning what do we do in classes with highly talented children or with the children with the learning difficulties or behavioral problems. When it comes to talented children or somehow specially gifted children, the teachers are trying to give them extra activities, extra tasks. So because they are often quicker than the others, so whenever they finish their task, the teacher goes very quietly to the desk of the students and says, I mean, you can continue from here. So they try to individualize the teaching a little bit. Very often also, although we Finns are not very good group workers, I hope I've been better in this group than Finns usually. So the gifted children are often asked to help those kids who've got problems so that they can go and teach and feel good about teaching the classmate, and they often learn through the teaching process themselves. As for the troublesome kids, we do have special education teachers who can come to the class and quietly work together, sitting next to the student. So it's very individualized teaching. Then sometimes, or very often actually, the special education teacher takes the child out of the class to the next classroom, where she can work with the student or with the pupil or with a group of them outside the class. And then we do have special institutions for children with all sorts of problems, learning problems, reading problems, but it's less than 2% of all the children who actually go to these special schools for troublesome kids. And then there was the question of multiculturalism. Well, I can't say much about it. In 2007, there was a group of teachers working for the Ministry of Education trying to come up with a vision for teacher education for the year 2020. And two things that came up in their vision were that there should be more, in their teacher education, there should be more, they should be able to learn things in English so that they would become better at English. And then secondly, there should be a number of classes and courses on multiculturalism. But I can tell from my Department of Education at the moment, they have one course that is worth 1 ECT. ECT, yes. And the students are complaining about it. But the problem is that, I mean, really, you come to Finland, I'm almost the darkest person you can see there, the brunette. And we look alike. I hadn't seen a person different from me until I was 13. And I was about 13 or 14 when I saw the first black person and the first Asian looking. And I was 13. And then I was in trailing 2 years after, and I came here and went all the way to Morocco, and I was blown out at the age of 15 that, well, not everybody looks like me. And this is the first year, we just had the election for the new parliament. And we have the first, I'm not even knowing the politically correct word, the half-black, blackish, whose roots are somewhere in Africa, the mother was Finnish, parliament member who's also a gay, openly gay. And this has been a mixture, a black, gay man as a parliament member. Has been very shocking for Finland. In Helsinki, there are schools where 50%, half of the students, are foreigners originally. But in central Finland, in northern Finland, there are towns and cities of tens of thousands of people who are Finns only. I mean, Finns is, you know, born in Finland and looking like me. So we do very poorly when it comes to multiculturalism. I'm sorry to say. Thank you.
So following that, my questions are in a similar vein. One question was, considering the diversity of the Spanish society, the increasing diversity, does social emotional education become more urgent? And of course the answer is yes. It's interesting when we look at the questions of our identity. We seem to feel that we're more homogeneous than we actually are. If you look at DNA results and people's ancestry, you'll find there's a huge mixture. And the idea of belonging to a nation is actually quite new. It only comes from the 13th and 14th centuries in Europe. Before then, there were no nations. A lot of it came about because of the antagonism between what we now call France and what we now call England. 100 Years' War and Joan of Arc was this sense that you belonged to the place where you were born and therefore your identity was wound up in that. It's created. It's part of human creativity to feel you belong to a nation. And of course, as I said earlier, things evolve, things change. In human life, nothing is static. So this idea of national identity that's homogeneous and you're the same is evaporating because of mobility, continental migration, economic pressures, poverty, deprivation. And this is part of the world we live in. And I think it's very important when I spoke this morning about this passage from information to knowledge to understanding. And that's why it's so important in our schools that the children learn to understand other cultures, not just have information, but have a feeling, respect for how other people live. Because we don't want to create a world where we're all the same, like robots, living the same lives with the same values. It's the variety that makes it important. Another question was then, if that's the case, are the values that we're espousing, are they universal? Do they belong to everybody? Well, the answer to that again actually is quite simple. Every country in the world except 2 have signed the Universal Declaration of the Rights of the Child. Yeah. So every country except 2, United States and Somalia, have signed up. And therefore those values are politically universally accepted. Now, if one looks at the document, it's very important not just to read the document by itself. It's very enlightening, as it is, but there are texts that explain more fully what is behind the words. And one is the right for the children to develop in a free way, to express themselves through art, to be able to have a full, rounded education as the rights of a child in that document. So in spite of there being different religious groups, different ethnic groups, different political instances in the world, nevertheless, that document is one that unites the whole world in a common endeavour. And of course, it's interpreted differently. Just as we said earlier, in social emotional education, every school will have a different context, because everybody who enters a school community changes it. As a teacher, you know, if a child enters the class, it's not the same class. If a family enters a school, it's not the same school. If a teacher changes schools, the school changes. A school is a creation. We create these places we call schools. It's not an abstraction, it's not a thing. It's a network of relationships. That's what a school is, a network. So every addition or subtraction makes it a different place. Where it is, the language, that all makes it different. But we do have then universal endeavours that we can share. And of course that's a political debate. There's a debate whether these are just Western values being imposed on other countries. Nevertheless, the fact that these countries have signed that declaration shows a universality that lies behind everything. But we just have to learn to interpret it, live with it, and be creative with it in different ways. And that leads to the third question, that the question was about the children themselves with their questions, because it seems to them that it's economics that rule the world, that they have more value than human life. How do you answer children who perceive that really it's money that counts? It's how consumerism, it's what you can gain in life. Another one said, it's like man is wolf to man, yes? This competitive world we live in. It is a competitive world, it is a challenging world, and we can't treat our children as though they're living on some little insular paradise that's removed from that. But what we are hoping then with this work is that they come to be able to deal with it in a way that is truthful and beautiful and good, that those things can go together with a world where there is a certain amount of challenge to do well, to do better each time. And if we look at the realm of money, money is an expression of our feelings. It's not a thing, again. Our financial system is an expression of what we feel about each other. When we have trust, the stock markets go up. When we lose confidence, the stock markets go down. It's all to do with feelings. What we deal with, how we deal with each other in social care, in unemployment money, in pensions. That is an expression of what we feel about each other. So it's not an autocratic divine intervention that money and the finances dictate what we do. It's an expression of how we feel about ourselves. And through the work we do, we can begin to change that and hopefully make it more benign. Yes, of course, there's great injustice in the world. There is much that's wrong. But if we can change our own personal attitude, one can make a contribution to the changes the children can make as well. And I think that's what we've tried to highlight a lot. It's not that teachers have to be superhuman, wonderful exemplars of how one should live. Of course, none of us are. But what teaches the children is the authenticity of who we are, that we struggle, that we question, that we look at our failures, we try and build our strengths, but recognize we are not perfect. Like Václav Havel, that meekness, that humility, that we're on a path. And that's what the children sense. And it encourages them to also to feel they're also on a path. In the hope then that we can eventually, we'll never create a utopia, we'll never create a perfect world, but I think we can certainly create a better one.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Now, most of the questions have to do with training, questions related to training, as I say. From what type of book can I buy? How can I be emotionally intelligent? And this book is in progress, almost 3,000 years, and is still at the publisher, at the printing house, that is now bankrupt. But we, together with the foundation, we're going to start a blog with teachers in a platform where you will have all this information accessible, this information that you may not really know where to find. There are similar websites in the United States and in other countries, and Spain, we really lack the availability of those resources. So what are the recommended books to work with children from primary education or secondary education? So later on, we will explain, we will give more information about this blog and this e-platform. Some of the questions are more related to the need to do training with teachers since they are in university, and I agree with this. Somebody said, and what about some therapeutical treatment? Wouldn't it be positive for teachers? Yes, we've always all had a crazy teacher in the past. I believe the therapeutical treatment is positive, but not only for teachers. It was the idea of organizing a type of doctoral studies for teachers, but then also judges and some other professions might need this type of lessons. Sometimes the level of emotional balance of some professionals are at risk. I believe that the more balanced the teachers, the better for our students, for our children. An unbalanced teacher, a teacher with negative emotions, of course, will convey them to his or her students. And at some stages of the education system, this might be very, very dangerous. Another question was, do you have master studies or courses and that? And that's quite complex. There aren't many official master studies, and the majority of them are too theoretical. It's a paradox, because the Spanish university, this is how it is. We had a doctorate course on emotional intelligence, the first in Spain with this degree, but we don't have it any longer because the structure of the university itself made it a very theoretical doctorate course. And you cannot create something so that you end up not enjoying it. It was too theoretical due to university regulations. It was just talking and talking and talking. And when I speak about applying emotional intelligence at school and university, I'm not thinking about theories. I'm not thinking about a textbook so that people might end up passing a test and then getting a certificate. That's very difficult. That's not possible. The idea is to have a master in emotional intelligence to be a living experience where people could really go through social and emotional tests so that they are not students that are just studying in a very theoretical manner, knowing about all authors that deal with emotional intelligence, but then when they relate to people, they really lack a capacity to relate emotionally to each other. That's why we eliminated this doctorate course. And everyone said, why is not there any longer? And we said, well, we didn't like it. It was just trial and error, but of course we always have to deal with university structures. And finally, some people persist, but University of Cantabria, together with the Botín Foundation, have organized a master course. The name is Social, Emotional, and Creative Education, that have tried in a very innovative combination. This is a private and public approach. And they have organized the master studies for teachers while they are at university, or they can simultaneously do a master course. That's very new. Usually you do a master studies after being a bachelor, but this master that lasts for 3 years, which is also quite new, because usually masters only last for 1 year, and they give a limited number of credits. So this is very new, and it has a theoretical part and a practical part with a mixture of subjects, which is quite innovative. In an official master, you cannot speak about education, creativity, and social or emotional education, but here they do. And somebody might said, as some said during lunch break, that because of the financial crisis, there are not public funds, we're not going to be able to train ourselves. Well, I believe we should be creative enough, as has been said by different professors here, and when in need, we have to be creative. And this is what we have to do. We have to self-organize ourselves. We have to forget the administration to always give all the answers. Why? Why can't we self-organize ourselves? Teachers, everyone that are interested in this subject, maybe we can ask for a tailorized type of course. It's not so expensive. That's what we do now. We group people that are interested in this subject, and we organize tailorized type of seminars or courses, and everyone is happy. And this is something that we should do, especially at a time of a financial crisis where everyone feels so depressed and sad. But those emotions that we call negative emotions, but they are emotions that allow us to stop and meditate. Because when you're very cheerful, which is something that happened in this country a few years ago, we were all very happy, and nobody has really reflected on things. Now that the situation is different, we have more time to reflect. Let us use it. Let us use it to see what are our weak points, because we have many, and let us invest time and resources in overcoming our situation. This is in our hands. We can struggle against the crisis. Thank you very much.
I have 3 questions, of which the first 2 are very easily to deal with. Some of you have asked where you can find the information on the Children's Need for Psychological Knowledge questionnaire. Now, Fatima Barrayo has promised me that they will put that information on the Botín website, where you can find it. And if you would like to translate it in whatever language, please notify us, but feel free to do so. So that's answer number 1. Answer number 2, some of you, and I think you suffer from a certain form of masochism, asked me where you can find the self-assessment for educational knowledge for teachers. I'll again promise you that we will give that information to Botín. You find the website where you can find those self-assessment questionnaires. But if you use them, promise me something. Yeah? Fill the questionnaire out and send me your score. Yeah? So that I can make a public statement with regard to the general developmental knowledge of Spanish teachers, yeah, during a conference in Madrid. Okay? Okay. So these are the first two questions. The last question is a very interesting one, and I would like to take some time to answer that because it might be of relevance. Yes, a few minutes. The question is, parents usually are the first persons that children meet and who can have a substantial influence on their social and emotional development. Now, how could parents be influenced in such a way that you promote that function as much as possible? There are actually two answers to that question. First is a preventative one. Christopher referred to the treaty, the UN Treaty for the Rights of Children. Well, the most interesting part of that treaty is its introduction. We call it a preamble. In the preamble, it is explicitly stated that children, now, listen to this formulation, children have a right to informed parents. Children have a right to informed parents. The treaty does not answer the question, who is going to inform parents and what about? That is still open. But that is a tremendous task, particularly for those scientists and practitioners and professional groups that deal with the development of children. This is first thing. A second important thing is, and you might not be aware of that, that we know what the basic skills are, cross-cultural relevant, that you would like every parent and every teacher to be equipped with. You might know that there is an institute in the United States which is actually the most, scientifically speaking, the most prestigious institute with regard to how to influence development of children through training parents, which is the Oregon Social Learning Center in Eugene, directed by a very famous developmental psychologist, Jerry Patterson. We already for quite a number of years have a project of concerted action, our center with them. And we identified 5 basic skills that we think every parent, every future parent particularly, but also present parents, Fatima, yeah, and every teacher should have in his or her repertoire. These basic cross-cultural 5 skills are, now write them down so that when you come home, you can practice them this weekend, okay? First, to structure. It's very important that children are being raised, exposed to an environment that has a specific, predictable structure, to structure, with rituals and everything. Second is to stimulate, which is to put emphasis on children's strengths and potentials, yeah, instead of, to, so to speak, to punish. Third is, which is the most difficult one, surprisingly, is to learn to ignore. To learn to ignore. Let me repeat that. This is also useful for your own love relationships. The quality of relationship very much depends also on the things you do not say. Yeah? Shall I repeat that? The quality of relationship depends also on the things you do not say. Parents, particularly mothers, but not only, have great difficulty to ignore certain behavior of their children, which they better ignore. Fourth is to communicate. To communicate means that parents are skillful in what the Greek originally called phatic communication. Phatic communication means you just talk to talk. You just talk to open the channels of communication. That is often not the case. If the children I work with in the particular class I discussed briefly this morning, if I ask them, when your father comes home and he tells you, I have to talk with you, what's your first reaction? And then a child says, uh-oh, a problem. Yeah? Yeah. That is not to communicate. To communicate means a lot of phatic communication. And maybe, after a while, also to talk about problems. Parents often have to learn to communicate. Teachers also in particular. The famous case of Ms. A being published by Peterson and the Harvard Educational Review showed that those teachers who spent with every student, every pupil in their classroom, during a semester, at least 5 to 6 minutes just emphatic communication has a much better relationship with them. So 4 is to communicate. And 5th is, if you are a modern man, father or mother, you all know it. 5th is to organize. Yeah? So to structure, to stimulate, to ignore, to communicate, and to organize. We train already for quite a number of years parents in the city of Rotterdam, in the city of The Hague and others, in these skills, but also teachers. Because many teachers are also parents and they often screw things both up at home and in the classroom. Yeah? And we know that the effects of the learning these skills are long-standing. You can even identify those effects after 3 to 4 years. Now this is about prevention. So this weekend, practice these 5 skills, okay? But there's one important remark I need to make here. Some parents deliver a child on this world while they're suffering from one or more psychiatric or psychological disorders. And the most powerful single risk factor for developmental problems in children is the presence of a psychiatric disturbance in a parent. One of our tasks is to make sure that very early on, for example, at the first child guidance clinic visit in the first 2 or 4 months, we as a society help parents to identify whether they might suffer from a psychiatric or an emotional disorder that interferes with their capacity to raise a child. Parents, we devised such a program which we call preventive parenting. Parents usually are very grateful for that. And they accept help because of the fact that they have a very common evolutionarily based goal, namely to raise their children as much as possible as mentally and physically healthy individuals. So we have an obligation here, very early on, help parents to identify whether they suffer from these kind of disorders or not, and help them and give them the appropriate help for that. Thus far, we haven't been too great in this respect. Yeah? And I haven't heard about preventive parenting programs in a country like Spain. But I think here's again a task on the road for Bhutan from here to the next 5 years. Thank you very much for your answer.